Good evening and welcome to our April 7th Douglas County Board of County Commissioners business meeting. We want to welcome any of you who are at the Douglas County Courthouse or joining us online. I just want to pass on a bit of information regarding how we'll run our meetings on Zoom during this time of social distancing. If visual aids are used during the meeting, the presenter will share the screen with the call. Participants will not be able to view them without a computer, smartphone, or tablet. All participants will be entered into the meeting with their audio muted, meaning the commission and the public will not be able to hear you. Presenters will be unmuted when their agenda item comes up. We ask that all online presenters use good conference call etiquette and mute their lines when not speaking and introduce themselves each time they speak. If you have public comment on an agenda item or under regular public comment, please use the raise your hand function on Zoom. Staff will call on you and unmute you. We ask that speakers give their name and address for the minutes. The county reserves the right to shut off the microphone and remove any speaker from the meeting if they are vulgar, rude, or inappropriate. A recording of this meeting will be available on our website after the meeting. Okay, we will start with a proclamation this evening. Sarah, do we have anyone who wants to share anything before I read the proclamation, or will sharing happen after we read it?
Eric Vaughn from Douglas County CASA is here. Eric, would you like to say a few words before the commissioners read the proclamation?
I would love to, yeah. Thank you so much. Yes, so I'm Eric Vaughn, Executive Director of Douglas County CASA, or Court Appointed Special Advocates, and I'm also representing the Douglas County Child Abuse Prevention Task Force. So on behalf of the task force and all the organizations and individuals it represents, I want to say thank you to the County Commission for taking action to proclaim April Child Abuse Prevention Month, and also for supporting children and families in our community through grants to the various nonprofit organizations in our community that provide education and awareness services and also intervene to support children and families when they experience abuse and neglect. Every child is born with countless possibilities, and as individuals and a community, we must ensure all our children and young people have the support that they need to realize their potential. Regardless of who they are or the circumstances of their birth, each child deserves to be cared for, cherished, and kept safe from harm. But tragically, 1 in 7 children experience abuse and neglect each year, and that definitely tarnishes and erodes the hope and potential for hundreds of children in our community each year. But this month, we celebrate the love and courage it takes to raise a child, and we affirm the fundamental human rights of all children to live free from violence and abuse, and we rededicate ourselves to ending the harm to many children and youth. A strong and stable family is the best foundation for a promising childhood. And when parents and caregivers have support from loved ones, friends, and their community, they are more likely to provide safe and healthy environments for children. It is important for all people to recognize the signs of child neglect, physical, sexual, and emotional abuse, including sudden changes in behavior or school performance and untreated physical or medical issues. Reporting any concerns could protect a child and connect the family to the help that they need. We at CASA strongly believe in the protective factor of a safe and caring adult in the life of a child. You don't have to be a CASA to do this, although we are recruiting new volunteers, so let us know if you or someone has a passion for helping children. But no matter your role, whether you're a teacher, law enforcement officer, friend, family member, or just a neighbor, I encourage you to be a good example and to offer kind words, encouragement, and care for each other. To take action to help if you have the opportunity and means, and especially do this for the children in your life and the adults who are caring for those children. This is especially important as we continue to work to overcome the COVID pandemic. You never know the impact love and care will have in the life of a child or a parent who is struggling. We are committed to strengthening families and doing everything we can to make it easier for caregivers to care for and provide for children. We believe in and encourage investing in evidence-based programs that provide positive parenting and caregiving to help prevent child abuse and neglect. And these efforts can decrease the number of children entering the foster care system and provide better outcomes for those in it. We also encourage leaders across all levels of government to invest in services for victims and provide the resources and protections our kids need. The work of raising our children is the most important job in our community, and it is also the most challenging. At times, it can be difficult to live up to the enormous responsibilities that come with being a parent, especially when families face hardship. If we do our best for our children to nurture their healthy development, seek assistance when needed, meet our obligations to them, and let them know that we love and care for them, we can demonstrate to our children that they are always our first priority. As individuals, our attitudes towards children set a powerful example that shapes their character and influences the kind of people they will become. During Child Abuse Prevention Month, we renew our commitment to protect the safety and well-being of every child, and we resolve to continue the hard work of raising a generation that can dream bigger and reach higher than ever before. So thank you again for allowing me to share a few remarks this evening and for signing the proclamation. And to learn more about how to prevent and report child abuse, visit childwelfare.gov or contact any of the wonderful nonprofit agencies in our community who support children, families, and other victims of crime.
This is Commissioner Portillo. Thank you very much, Eric. We really appreciate your words. And I will read the proclamation before we vote on it. So whereas children are key to the county's future success, prosperity, and quality of life, and while children are our most valuable resource, they are also our most vulnerable. Whereas child abuse and neglect can have long-term psychological, emotional, and physical effects in addition to long-term personal, economic, and social costs, whereas child abuse and neglect can be prevented by increasing protective factors, conditions in families and communities that when present reduce or eliminate the risk and promote the well-being of children and families, whereas we acknowledge that we must work together as a community to increase awareness of child abuse and neglect and to promote the protective factors that prevent child abuse and neglect. Parental resilience, the ability of parents to deal effectively with stress, adversity, or trauma. Social connections, such as relationships with family, friends, neighbors, or other community members. Concrete support, which gives families the support and resources they need during times of struggle and stress. Knowledge of parenting and child development, because children thrive when parents understand how to appropriately care for children. And social and emotional competence of children, which helps children properly label and understand different emotions in themselves and others. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of County Commissioners of Douglas County, Kansas hereby proclaim April 2021 as Child Abuse Prevention Month in Douglas County, Kansas. And I know we just did one of these last week, but do we need to vote on that? Or
No, we don't.
Thank you. Thank you, Eric, so much for joining us. Other commissioners, do you have anything to add? Go ahead, Commissioner Reed.
I just wanted to say thanks for coming, Eric, and providing all of that information. And the work of CASA is really important, crucial part of systems advocacy work in our communities. So I appreciate that. And prevention work is necessary in a variety of places. So I'm glad we can help put a spotlight on it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Everything Commissioner Reed just said, yes, I agree.
Well, thank you. And with that, we will move to our consent agenda. Thank you so much for joining us, Eric.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And commissioners, would you like to pull anything from our consent agenda?
Nope.
Sarah, is there anyone in the courthouse with you?
There's no one here to pull any items off the consent agenda. And then I am also going to play Jill and monitor the online participants as well. So if anyone on our online attendees would like to remove an item from the consent agenda, please use the raise your hand function on Zoom to raise your hand to request to pull an item off consent. Commissioners, I'm not seeing anyone requesting to remove an item off consent.
Okay, so I'm looking for a motion to approve our consent agenda.
Move to approve our consent agenda. I
Second.
know. Okay.
And I'll bring it to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
And we will move on to general public comments. Sarah, I'm going to assume that you are still alone in the courthouse, but is there anyone online for general public comment?
Just a reminder, if anybody would like to make comment on an item not on our agenda for tonight, please use the raise your hand function on Zoom and we will move you into the meeting. Commissioners, I'm not seeing anyone with a hand raised. Oh, we just got one. So I will move that person over. Okay. Mr. Bartz, you're in the meeting and you can come off Zoom. I do want to say this is for general public comment. So if you're here to speak about an item on our agenda, we take that comment under that item. But you can go ahead and unmute yourself if you're here for general public comment.
I'm sorry. I thought it was for any agenda item, so,
No, this is for items not on the agenda.
okay, gotcha.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. This is Commissioner Portillo. We will come back to you when we get to your agenda item.
Okay,
So
thank
hold
you.
tight for a bit.
All right.
And I believe with that, then Sarah, we are ready to move on to our regular agenda. We will start with item 4.1, zoning and codes. Consider adopting Home Rule Resolution HR 2142 and repealing Home Rule Resolution HR 0531 and HR 0764, all relating to the use and sale of fireworks. Do we have a presentation for this item?
Commissioners, Tanya Voigt with Planning and Zoning is here to talk about this item. I believe she may have some additional staff. Tanya, make sure we've got everyone over that you want us to have over.
Yes,
I'll
can
turn
we
it over.
please move Dravel Taylor over as well? I see him.
Yeah.
We're going to share this presentation tonight. So between Dre and I will should be able to hammer it out. I'm Tanya Voigt, the zoning director. Good evening, commissioners and Sarah. So let's share screen real quick.
Let's see. There we go. Does that show up properly?
We're seeing presenter mode, and you are welcome to leave it in that if you'd like, but
Let's
we
see.
can see kind of your notes in the next slide. So
Let's see here. There we go. Yep.
perfect.
All right.
Okay, so tonight we'll be just talking about the current fireworks regulations and some proposed changes that our staff is recommending these would be primarily for discharging of fireworks in the county, as well as fireworks stands in the county. So we'll provide some background on why we're before you tonight, our proposed amendments, the public comments that we've received so far, which have been very great, and then options for the board as we move forward. The last update to the fireworks regulations was in 2007. In preparation of upcoming fireworks season, zoning and codes took the initiative to review the current regulations and to address an overall cleanup of the existing fireworks regulations. We reviewed the standards and reached out for comments regarding some of the issues departments have faced. These challenges include a fireworks stand operating on property recently sold without approval of the new landowner, zoning and floodplain violations on stand sites. We've had complaints about large brush piles, lack of property maintenance, sign size and banner complaints, and challenges associated with fireworks ignited on county property. To address some of these concerns, we've drafted the recommendations that we'll go over tonight. Keep in mind, based on the comments that we've received, some of these suggestions may change, but we wanted to show you what our initial draft looked like and what we can develop from there. You'll hear a variety of comments from departments involved with fireworks tonight, as well as comments from the fireworks stand applicants. We have no problems with allowing additional time to gather more public input, as this is some change and it does impact a variety of fireworks stands, and bring this back to you at a later date. Dre, take it from here.
All right, at this point, we'll just be going step by step through each of the proposed amendments. So the first one is 6-202C6, prohibited locations on any county-owned properties unless sponsored by the governing body. This was a public comment from Chad Voigt, and the purpose was to help negate the harm that the fireworks were having on Lone Star Lake itself, the property surrounding, and also Wells Overlook. According to Chad, every year residents leave hundreds of pounds of waste, and they've had to use dump trucks to help remove some of that debris. This would help, reduce liability and fire risk to county-owned properties, and help save money by not having to send all those resources out to those locations every year. So if Chad Voigt is on the call, I believe he is, I think he has some additional comments to include.
We'll promote Chad to panelist if you want to make comments now, Chad.
Good evening. Yeah, I just got on. Let me show you not my ceiling and I'll show myself. There we go. Thanks, Dre. Didn't have any idea that was coming. So the suggestion that we made about county properties was something that we've talked about in the past, but it never has really gotten very far in terms of actually implementing. So we do have at both Lone Star Lake Park and Wells Overlook Park, we have every year a lot of fireworks that are left behind. We've had to send out our operations crews on July 5th, which last year, of course, was a Sunday on a holiday weekend, and clean up the mess. And there are also, you might recall, we had some complaints last year from folks who wanted to fish on July 4th during the daytime at Lone Star, and they had people shooting fireworks off right next to them on the lake shore. I think there are also maybe some concerns about fireworks in the water. Obviously, there are a lot of toxins involved with explosives, and that's just an environmental concern that I think some people may feel is an issue. So I also realize there are people that enjoy shooting off fireworks in those areas. So we've heard from both sides. I do think that the cleanup effort is costly, it's a little bit dangerous, and I think there are other people at these parks that would enjoy not having fireworks as part of the use. So that's why the suggestion is there, and really that was the only driving factors behind it.
We also did hear from Sheriff Armbruster, and he had some concerns as to where people from the city would go to shoot fireworks. Right now, that's the main location where they go. There are people who, pull off to the side of the road in the right of way and shoot off fireworks in random locations in the country. And so that was a concern of his. The next amendment was that prohibiting firework stands from being located on unincorporated properties that are completely surrounded by city limits. Tanya, I'll let you take this one.
Yeah, so there's a couple reasons why we kind of added this to the mix. One of the reasons really was we knew that the city was really focused on infill, and that we have lots right now that have fireworks stands that are completely vacant all year long, but they're surrounded by the city limits. And when we've had lots of conversations with the city about them really trying to focus on those lots that are they're in the county today, but they're completely surrounded by the city limits, about those, the highest and best use of those parcels really is in the city limits and developing. And so we had some talk initially just about whether we should or shouldn't try to do that shove and try to, make decisions that push lots that are surrounded by the city limits to truly go into the city limits. And that would mean limiting uses. And that's the way to do it, really, in any type of land use situation, to kind of give a nudge. You take away options. I don't know, we've had a lot of public comment on this. We've heard from Chris King, the city of Lawrence. He's a division fire chief, And he really doesn't have concerns, safety concerns. Some of the complaints that we've gotten on lots that are surrounded by city limits is also looking at the density around those lots. So some of those lots have apartment complexes, multifamily dwellings, churches, and single family houses surrounding that city lot, or that county lot. And so if there were a fire to break out on that location, it could impact a lot of properties at a much higher dense rate than maybe other properties located out in the county that have a lot of open space around them. But I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether we're saving one life or 100 lives. They're all important. And so we really wanted to involve the city. We talked to planning, we talked to the fire chief, and they do not have any concerns with there being tent sites on those sites that are completely surrounded by the city limits. And so this may actually be a little bit too much of a push. And maybe we need to back out just a little bit on that component and think about if we really are worried about fire safety, and that's the concern if someone flicks their cigarette butt, into the grass, or fireworks are discharged accidentally from the location and it starts a fire. Maybe the actual answer is to take a step back and not be so restrictive and think about smaller steps that could achieve those safety issues. And so just maybe thinking out loud from public comment that we've received would be prohibiting smoking entirely on those sites. So they are not allowed to smoke in the tents. So no smoking can happen in the fireworks tents, but you can walk a distance from the tent and smoke. And so maybe that is, a happy medium or compromise for these types of lots. So I can't tell you that we have, a real answer for you tonight on where we are with this proposed kind of suggestion. We tend to take the most restrictive regulation and present that to the public always, because it's really hard to take something that you've put out in the public, a draft, and then make it more restrictive. But it's a little bit easier to make something a little bit more restrictive and then take a step back and say, maybe that was too restrictive. So that we have incorporated that was in our draft, but I do believe based on comments tonight that you may be hearing some different directions and different alternatives to that.
Dre, you're
Still
muted. Yeah, Dre, you're muted.
There we go. If Chief Baxter is on the call, if you could promote him. And then these next two amendments were related to that. So 6-202D, sky lanterns, he wished for those to be added to the prohibited fireworks list. And then 6-203D, appropriate zoning, we simply adjusted the allowed zoning districts per the 2020 zoning regulations updates. And if Chief Baxter wants to talk on the sky lanterns.
Chief, we've moved you into the panel if you have comments.
I'm assuming you're waiting for Chief Baxter.
Yes, that's who I was referring to. Sorry, Chief Baxter. Chief Baxter, we've moved you into the panel.
Hi, Sarah. This is Mike. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, this is Chief Baxter with Consolidated Fire District number 1. And thank you for listening to me tonight. The sky lanterns has been an issue in the past. And for everybody's knowledge, the sky lantern is basically a big paper type balloon that has an open flame. And it's designed just to be carried out across the skyway. Some of the concerns with that is in the unincorporated area of Douglas County, where they land, it's open fields, it's pastures, it's tree lines. there are residential structures that it could land on, and it is an open flame, and it doesn't just go out until that firework mix is completely burned out. And so that was a recommendation. Most of the counties and cities within have already banned or restricted the use of those.
Thank you, Chief Baxter. All right, moving forward, we have 6-204. We have adjusted the fee from $125 to $250. And we have also adjusted the submission window from June 1st through June 25th to April 1st through June 7th. And this, the fee change was to help mitigate the cost that zoning and codes faces when it comes to site plan review and then site visitations. Sometimes we have to go out to a site multiple times if there are violations or inadequacies on site. And traveling anywhere within Douglas County usually takes about 30 minutes, as most of you know. And so it's just trying to recoup some of the cost associated with processing these permits, staff time, travel time, and whatnot. The submission window was kind of a carrot to the fireworks stands. It was to allow them extra time to get things in order, provide for getting those neighbor notification letters that we'll talk about later. And then for zoning and codes to have adequate time to go visit them and then give them time to remedy any issues on site. 6-204C. So fireworks distributors in Kansas have to be licensed with the state. And so this is just saying that we want to ensure that when these stands are coming into Douglas County, that they got their fireworks from a licensed distributor. 6-204D, we added a liability insurance requirement. This was a common sense item to add. Most, if not all, of the fireworks stands already do carry liability insurance, but this is our way to ensure that all of them do and that there is an adequate amount of dollars behind that in case there is a worst case scenario. We amended the distance from source of flame, spark, etc., from 50 feet to 100 feet. And then we increased the distance between vehicles and the stand from 20 to 50 feet. And then we also require that if there are any smoking areas outside of the required 100-foot buffer, that smoking receptacles be provided just to ensure that cigarettes aren't being dropped on the ground and causing fires. Flame retardant treatments of 6-205 F2. This could be found in the International Building Code 2012, which Douglas County has adopted. So that just brings that into alignment. And then 6-205 G 1, 3, and 4 means of egress. These were recommendations by Chief Baxter as well. Chief, if you'd like to comment on any of these.
Yeah, this is Mike Baxter, Fire Chief for Consolidated Fire District 1. And the main recommendation for that was to bring more uniformity and alignment with the state. The state requirements are 48 inches on the checkoff sheets. And so that was just to bring that all into uniformity across the board.
Thank you, Chief. The next section, fire extinguishers and telephone. We added that they need to require emergency contact information for the owner and manager, and that needs to be clearly posted at the tent or structure. That way, individuals, whether they're members of the public or staff, they can clearly identify who's in charge of there and then get in a hold of them in case of an emergency. We also increased the mowing requirements for parking and the site preparation. A bigger change that we did was that we will require the applicant to send notice to property owners in a 1,000-foot radius and up to 400 feet into city limits if it buffers it. So every application that zoning and codes issues, whether it's a special event permit, CUP, requires neighbor notification. And this is just to inform the neighbors of the upcoming impact that this proposed use will have on them. This will not give members of the public any ability to fight the fireworks permits. This is a formality just to inform them that this is happening in their area. And Tanya, if you want to expand on that, you can.
One thing I'd just like to add to that is that all of our applications, which include any of our planning applications, which would be a special event permit for a wedding on a piece of property just for one night. It would include fireworks displays where people shoot off large displays. It includes temporary business uses where a business is just going to come in and do a temporary, we had Hildebrand Milk do a temporary business use where they sold milk from a site a few months ago. All of those permits require neighbor notification. And we were kind of stumbled or we just weren't sure why fireworks stands that requirement wasn't there. So we've just incorporated that in just to be consistent with all of our applications.
Thank you. All right, and so these are some comments from members of the public that we've received. There have been members who have requested that we increase the number of days fireworks stands can sell to the public to match that of the state, which is, I believe, June 27th through July 5th. We've had a request to increase the fee at the campsites so that fireworks stands, or increase the fee at campsites and fireworks stands to assist with the cleanup cost associated with the county property cleanup, or adding additional dumpsters and trash to those locations as well, and to incorporate cleanup signage. There has been concerns from individual firework stand owners about the neighbor mailings. There's been discussion from individuals who own the island lots and city limits. And then property owners have expressed concern about being able to fire off fireworks from the docks when they own property in the Lone Star area. Larry Bartz, who's the head of the Fireworks Association in Douglas County, he would like to see additional fees for vendors to help pay for the cleanup to keep those areas available to the public. He did dispute the 50-foot parking distance from the fireworks stand, but he said that 30 feet would be more appropriate. He did want to be able to sell between July 7th or 27th and June 27th and July 5th. And then he wanted to see if we could remove the alcohol prohibition aspects on out of the regs. And then he wanted to amend the removal of tents from July 8th to July 10th. So at this point, these are the following options for you, the board, to make. You can make amendments to any section of the proposed ordinance based off of comments and feedback. You could accept the resolution as is, or you could table the item till the May 5th hearing to provide additional time for public comment.
And the reason that we chose May 5th is just to give maybe another 30-day time period. If there really truly isn't a rush, I do think there are a lot of people who have a lot of comment to provide that maybe haven't been incorporated in our draft. And so that May 5th date was just kind of an average 30 days. Let's collect some more data and then come back.
This is Commissioner Portillo. Thank you very much for the presentation. We'll open it up to questions from commissioners. Do we have any questions from commissioners?
I have a couple of questions. This is Commissioner Kelly. My first one is for Chad. Chad, do we have any other holidays or events that require similar allocation of resources for cleanup? I mean, is there any other, trying to think of anything?
I can't think of anything. I mean, we respond primarily to weather events.
Tanya, do you know when the $125 fee was set? How long is the $125 fee? This isn't a test. I'm just, if you know, that would be great.
I don't believe it changed in 2007 when the regulations were changed some, that the fee was not changed at that time. So I'm not sure when the previous resolution, let me see if I can find it. I don't have an answer for it. I would assume that the fee has been the same since the 80s when fireworks were allowed to be discharged on county property at Lone Star and at Wells Overlook, that was the fee at that time. Most of our fees from the planning and zoning side have not changed in those time spans.
So it's been a long time is what you're saying.
Correct.
And Sarah, I don't know if this is for you or if Sheriff Armbruster, can you talk at all about enforcement? If we ban this at Lone Star and at Wells Overlook, what enforcement's gonna look like?
I'd be glad to respond, and I know Tanya's had some conversations with the sheriff as well. I do believe enforcement's a challenge. I don't think law enforcement are necessarily looking forward to issuing violations of this. And so I think in some ways, like with a lot of things, like public health orders, we're trying to encourage good behavior and encouraging people to clean up after themselves as opposed to necessarily writing a lot of tickets or violations.
And the sheriff did mention to me as well that he likes knowing where the public is going to collect themselves in one or two locations versus if they were prohibited on county property, the spreading out of everyone going to county roads. There's just not, there's not as much of a sense of security of knowing where to respond to and knowing the larger percentage of the people are in one or two places versus just spread out everywhere.
And I would add, Tanya, I believe our current ordinance prohibits people from shooting fireworks on the side of the road. So obviously that's also an enforcement issue, but we don't allow that.
Thanks. Those are my questions.
This is Commissioner Reed. Those are my questions, but I do have one follow-up to Commissioner Kelly's request about the fees. I'm wondering, I had a hunch maybe it had been a long time, or at least since the last time the code had been updated. I wonder if we know what surrounding counties fees look like, and if there is any, just curious what the context, and thinking about that in terms of the folks who are setting up fireworks stands and whether or not they are determining which counties to look at for doing their business based on that.
I think several of our fireworks stands operators, they also operate in other counties, in Leavenworth County and Franklin County and Jefferson County, and have multiple stands. They may be able to comment kind of on the fee. We have not done any research on what other counties are charging for fireworks stands. And another thing we could do is we could provide that information as well as do just a little internal review of the time it takes, for an employee to walk through and do all the things that are necessary to review the site plan, to provide feedback back to the site plan, to enter the permit, take the collect the funds, go out, the building codes inspector inspect the site along with fire. And so there's a lot of components to setting up the tents. So we could even do just kind of a rough formula on kind of staff time and where that would come out to as well. We'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, I was another question I was thinking about when reading through the packet was wondering if you've noted, if it's a noticeable increase over the years and sort of the amount of applications and staff time spent, or if it's relatively predictable, but you all are acknowledging that it's a pretty significant amount of work that goes into it, which which seems to be the real reason behind wanting to expand that timeline also to give space for that. And it's okay if you don't know right now, Tanya. I'm just curious if it's, I don't have any, reading on that, whether or not I have noticed more stands pop up, or if it's kind of a predictable number and able to plan for it with staffing.
I just pulled up, in 2014, we had 12 stands. I think last year we were at 15. So the numbers maybe are slightly increasing. I think we have some stands now that have more than one stand. So they're property owners that are putting, multiple stands at multiple locations, and they started out with possibly just one. So we have grown just a little bit, but it's nothing super substantial.
I would add there too, on behalf of the staff that does this work, this is a really, the inspections have to be done in a very tight time frame on top of everything else that they already have in place. So I think the increase is really more related to how it is an extensive amount of time that's required, and it's a very tight window. And if someone is out of the office ill, anything like that, it presents a real challenge for the department at that time of year.
If we don't have additional questions from commissioners, we will open this item up for public comment. I know we have at least one person online. Sarah, I'm assuming no one's joined you in the courthouse?
I don't have anyone here at the courthouse, but I'm going to move over Lyric Bartz for public comment. Lyric, you've been moved into the webinar and you should be able to unmute yourself and make public comment. Lyric, you'll need to unmute your microphone. There you go.
Got it. My concerns are mainly with how many.
Lyric, could you state your name and address for the record, please, before you start your comments?
My name is Lyric Bartz. And what else did you want to know?
Your address, please.
Okay, 1819 East 1200 Road, 66049.
Thank you, Lyric. Please go ahead with your public comment.
We have had fireworks stands for over 25 years, and we always consider the safety of the community and our customers. As I used to tell people, our safety procedures are usually much more extensive than anything we're required to do. For one reason, that's my family in that tent. And I'm not going to put them at risk. But I also feel very responsible to our community to make sure that we are offering as many safety procedures as not only necessary, but are appropriate. And so I don't want everybody to think that fireworks stands are just in it to make a quick buck. There's a lot of time, expense, and employees that are necessary to run an efficient tent, and we try and do our very best. We try and stay up to the codes, not only of the state, but anything that the fireworks distributors send on to us too. We have extended our tents from 1 to 3, and we still maintain a family connection with every one of our tents. There is somebody managing in our tents that is a family member. And I just wanted everybody to know that we do take safety as a very high priority. That's all.
Thank you very much for your public comment. Sarah, do we have additional public comment?
We do. I'm going to move over Eric Garrett. into the panel to provide public comment. Mr. Garrett, Eric Garrett, if you wanted to make public comment, you can please give us your name and address for the record.
Okay, can you hear me all right?
We can, thank you.
Okay. Let's see, I can start video too. There we go. All right, can you see me okay as well? So my name is Eric Garrett and I live at 1229 Greenbrier Drive in Eudora, Kansas. And I own Garrett's Fireworks, which we are known around the area as K10 Fireworks. We're east of Lawrence on K10 Highway. And we've had camel rides for many years at that location until, of course, COVID hit. So with that being said, we've been at our location for 30 years. And the way that this is written, if you know, when we moved out to that part of town, we were the only game in town, and there was just nothing but us and farmland industries in the area. And since then, the city has actually moved in around us, and we are buying that land. My father is actually buying that land, and that was to protect our fireworks sales interest for the foreseeable future. But the way this is stated kind of makes it sound like we all try to find these little islands in the city and we jump in and take advantage of a situation. But in our case, the city has moved into our area. And if this is passed the way it is written, then we will lose our location that we've had for 30 years. We, just like Ms. Bartz expressed, we hire employees, we pay a lot of sales tax every year to the county in that location. Some other things that we, you know, I've spoken with Tanya numerous times, or actually one time in Great Leaf, and we are definitely not against a modernization of this process. There are some things out of date. We discussed that, including the sales times. And then the application fee is a little on the low side from what we're used to. And I recommended to her that, you know, if that was raised, even it could help fund the cleanup of the Lone Star Lake or any other time expenditures put on. And if we had a longer sales period, that could actually help with inspectors, giving them more time to come into the locations. The other concern that we have is we already have our product purchased for that location. We plan literally from July 5th of the prior year, we plan all year long to have our location allocated. We've already purchased the product for it, and it's already even stored away in a separate trailer ready to go because we do things months in advance in this industry. The other disadvantage that we have is that a lot of the surrounding cities like DeSoto, Eudora, Baldwin, all have sales periods that are longer than what we are doing now. And insurance, I think somebody said most of us already have insurance. That is true. That's more of a formality for us. And yes, it should be stated in there that we need to have insurance. I don't know anybody that doesn't at this point, and it is usually about $1 million. And then the other issue that I see is troublesome is trying to notify everybody within 1,000 feet. And I'm not opposed to that in any way. I don't know how we have the time or resources to track down everybody within that geographic area. And if we were furnished that information from the county, we'd be happy to mail it or something to that effect. I don't know how that's done with other things, but that I just see being problematic, but we'll work around it. And I think the other thing that I noticed is that in the actual red line document, you have Article 2, which is the use and sale of fireworks, and then it goes to the 6.202, use of fireworks prohibited. And then there's subsections A, B, C, and then subsections under that with numbers. And then that's where it states fireworks stands may not be located on unincorporated properties completely surrounded by city limits. But that should fall under the sale of fireworks, not under the use of fireworks. So at its core, I see some fundamental problems with this document in its current state. So I would recommend not voting for it in its current state, and that it be tabled to another time, possibly even after our season, because we've already got the balls rolling for this season going forward. And we would be happy to meet, with a committee or anybody one-on-one to tell our opinions about this process and what needs to be redone or included or excluded. We would be happy to do that. On the federal level, I'm with the American Pyrotechnics Association, and we work with top people at the DOT, because the federal government knows that we know the most about our industry, and that we work with government to regulate because we have extensive knowledge about the products that we sell. And this can work at a local level too. We'd be happy to work with you. Modernize. If we're going to increase fees and modernize, we might as well increase the sales time so that we can keep up with everybody else too. So that's all I have. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. We appreciate the public comment.
Thank you.
Sarah, do we have anyone else?
Yes, commissioners, we do. I'm going to move in Larry Bartz into the.
And while you're moving, Larry, just a quick reminder to everyone, we do typically keep public comment to 3 minutes per person.
Mr. Bartz, please, you can unmute yourself and state your name and address for the record.
Okay, my name's Larry Bartz, and I live at 1819 East 1200 Road, have 3 fireworks stands. I did a quick run of the taxes that we pay. In the last 6 years, we paid over $75,000 worth of taxes, sales tax, which is for 24 days is a lot. So I also paid out in payroll $165,000 in payroll. And yeah, I pay my people well, and they make sure that they do things right. So sorry, I didn't. There we go. But I agree with most of the things. And in fact, it was probably Tanya and I talking last year was what prompted this. But I wanted to work on it in August, September timeframe versus now, right before the season. It's just it's a much more difficult time. I agree with modernizing, raising the fees doesn't bother me. I mean, it's and we talked with Tanya and Dre about it. We all said, look, or at least the people that I've talked to, which is about half of who's there, who has stands, but we're all on board with that, and we just want people to be fair. And one of the things that concerned me about particularly the going from 20 feet to 50 feet where a car has to be parked. I mean, all my stands are out pretty much in the open except for the teepee, and I can do that at the bypass, 31st Street. I can fit 50 foot away. I can't at the teepees. There just isn't any way, because I'm there next to 24 highway, and it's all on gravel and millings or whatever. So I'd have to park them out in the yard, which isn't a good scenario either. So you lend to people get hurt when they're spinning around, especially if it rains a little bit or whatever out in the pastures. So but really, other than those things, I did want to say too, Topeka, one of the biggest things that we had going on a couple of years ago was one of the Topeka fireworks, or actually it was a Perry fireworks stand from Jeff County. They put signs up all over the city of Lawrence, and they were up from like it was it was definitely mid-June till after July 4th. And it just, you know, they get the opportunity to sell. I'm not particularly concerned about the time frame as much as I am, you know, the 75-foot rule. I don't have any problem with that for the exits, all those kind of things. That's all makes good common sense. And we're a local, we live here, we work here. You know, we're good people, and we try to do the right things for the community. I mean, I was out volunteering out at the fairgrounds for the vaccine. So, I mean, you know, we try to do those things. My wife's been out there several times. So, you know, that's what we do. And quite honestly, fireworks is paid for a lot of our kids' education and those kind of things. And because they've grown up in it. I mean, they were little tiny when they first started in the fireworks business, and now they all run one. So basically, so anyway, I do appreciate it, and I'll wrap it up. Thank you. And I appreciate anything you guys can do. And I would like to put it off till after the 4th or after this year's season.
Thank you. We really appreciate the public comment and very much appreciate you and your wife's volunteering with our COVID vaccine operations. Thank you for that service. Sarah, do we have anyone else for public comment?
We do. I'm going to promote Peter Shanuda into the webinar as a panelist. You can unmute yourself and speak. You need to state your name and address for the record.
Hi, this is Peter Shanuda. Thanks for having this meeting. I wanted to chat with you guys. We own one of the 2 properties that are being affected by these rules. And I talked to Tanya, and she's a wonderful person. We sat and spoke after I received the email. And she explained to me why this is happening, that 3 sides of a property cannot be touched in the city limits, okay? And it's only affecting 2 folks. If the city thinks that if they say we can't use it for fireworks, if that is a way to bring us into the city limit, it really is not for me or the other individual, I believe, because our taxes will go higher. And the city is trying to do the infill. And I will say this, we own a land on 1900 Tennessee Street, and it's 100-foot wide. When I tried in the last few months to bring that in to build something on it, the city pretty much torched our property. Took about 10 feet here, 15 feet here, 20 feet here for this and that. So if the idea behind 3 sides is to make sure that we come into the city limit, I'm not going to do it because my taxes are going to go higher. So it defeats the purpose of that. My second comment is, why is it 3 sides? Are you saying that one side is not important? I think all 3, if it's going to be all 3 sides, I think then it must be everybody not touching the city limit, because it's okay to have one side. What if there is a problem with them? Is that I'm trying to explain where I'm trying to say is that one side not irrelevant? It has to be 3 sides before we can take action. Also, let's think about this. When was the last time we had a fire issue with a fire stand? I mean, I rent my property and I don't get very much out of it. I rent it out to Jake's Fireworks, which is the biggest contract or fireworks company in the country. And they follow all the regulations. We leave our property clean. Last year, Tanya approached me about cutting the grass and being a good neighbor, even though I'm not required. And I said, I will do my best to keep it clean. It's a little lot on 31st Street. So I really think if you're going to push the 3 sides, then you might as well push all sides, because then it's fair than just put everybody out in the country where they shouldn't be touching a city limit. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes. And I think the question is, we need to look at what are the neighbors concerned about? It's fire. Okay, let's look what can cause a fire. If somebody's smoking in within 50 feet or 100 feet. Today we have restaurants where you can't smoke cigarettes at all. So we can put a, no smoking period outside of your car, that you cannot be on the property if you're smoking. Let's look at the source of what could cause the problems, not think there is a problem. So I ask you that my only 2 points is, I'd like that, like the previous person said, let's make it longer. We're walking revenue outside of our county. And this is an opportunity. If we extended, these folks won't run out to Topeka or somewhere and buy their fireworks. So that's my other thing. 4 days, if you extend it to 7 or 5, there is not, what's the difference 2 days? I mean, people are going to get to enjoy to go out with family. Most of the people walking out to these fireplaces are kids and parents and stuff. Give them an extra couple of days to enjoy that feeling of the 4th of July, extended a little bit. My other concern is, if you're going to say, if you're surrounded by 3 sides of a city, then you're saying 3 sides is important, but 1 side is not important. Let's just be fair. And we've never had any problems or never had any issues with fireworks on our property. No fire, no complaints.
Thank you, Mr.
So,
Shinoda.
no problem. Thank you.
We really appreciate your public comment. Sarah, do we have anyone else here for public comment online?
Yes, I believe we have one more. I'm going to move over Jeremy Long.
Thank you.
Jeremy, you should be in the panel and you can unmute yourself. Please state your name and address for the record, please.
Can you hear me? I can't get my video to work.
We can hear you, Jeremy.
Oh, there it is. Thank you. My name is Jeremy Long. I live at 11231 Lakeview Drive in Kansas City, Kansas. However, my family and I, we have a retail fireworks stand on our family property south of town. We've been there for 20 years. I actually believe this year will be year 20. I started it when I was in high school. And overall, I don't have any problem with modernizing the fireworks regulations. However, it becomes very concerning. There was some mix-up. We didn't find out about this meeting until a few days ago when Larry Bartz contacted us. And I do think there would be a lot to gain if there was collaboration between the stand owners and the county on these regulations. And I think at best it would be to table it as it was suggested earlier. Additionally, I want to note that we began planning for our season pretty much as soon as the last one ends. I was speaking to Tanya earlier, and it was kind of ironic that while we're discussing insurance, I received an email today to get my insurance paperwork renewed. This is really a year-round business, and everything falls into place as it goes. Like Larry, I believe, said, if we could wait to make any major changes until August or September, that would benefit us the most. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Sarah, do we have anyone else for public comment on this item?
I'm not seeing anyone with their hand raised for public comment under the attendee section.
Thank you. Then we will reopen this for commissioner discussion. I do just want to say I really appreciate all of the thoughtfulness from the public comments that we've heard today. I've also received some emailed public comments and phone calls, and it sounds like Tanya and her staff have as well. And I really appreciate all of the consideration for talking with the community and making sure that we're getting all of the input that we need for this topic. Just from what I saw from the presentation, from what I'm hearing from public comment, it does sound like it may make the most sense for us to table this for now and spend some time, allow staff to spend some time gathering more input. From what I heard from kind of the public comment that we had here, it may not make sense to rush it to May 5th, but maybe even just make sure we get something on the calendar for who wants to be involved and do this in late summer after this fireworks season. Because if we're going to make changes, I prefer to do a lot of updating all at once rather than kind of piecemeal this. And it sounds like there are some smaller updates and some bigger updates. I do really appreciate everyone's willingness to modernize and recognize that that fee hasn't increased for a long time. It will probably need to cover the real expenses of issuing these permits, making sure everyone stays safe, and potentially clean up. Commissioner Reed?
Yeah, thank you. So I would echo those comments, and I think that it sounds like waiting is a good idea at this point. I'm interested to hear from staff if they feel that there's any reason that we really want to reconvene the conversation prior to this season rather than waiting till after the season, because we did hear that from quite a few folks who showed up for public comment, and I do think it's important to have their input throughout the process. So I guess that's one question I have for staff today. If there's any particular reasons wanting to or issues to address before this July 4th that you want to point out to us. And then I just want to, circling back to, I think it was Commissioner Kelly who asked about enforcement earlier, and then the feedback from Sheriff Armbruster is, I think an interesting piece of it, stopping the behavior of shooting off fireworks out in the county, especially for City of Lawrence residents, specifically who can't do so in the city limits. There is something to be said for the predictability of knowing where that's happening and being able to respond in an efficient way in case of an emergency, and also think through how do we mitigate some of those issues, both safety and waste issues at specific sites rather than throughout the entire county, and wondering what that could look like, on July 5th of this year, if people were no longer allowed to go to the parks. And then I also, on that issue, am weary of, criminalizing behavior on that day, and wanting to, what would enforcement really look like, and probably fines and intervention, I would assume. But yeah, those are some of the issues that I thought through when initially reading the comments. And so I would like for staff to and both Public Works and the Sheriff's Office, and it sounds like the Fireworks Association also is a good partner in that conversation, because I really appreciated the notion that one, raising the fees seems to be a very reasonable thing, and that we could even go higher. That's great to hear. And that we can really think of how we're using those funds to address this once a year issue that we're seeing at our two county parks. And so I like that idea, and I would like to hear more about that and what that could look like without banning it at those parks.
Well, I don't have a whole lot more to add than what the other commissioners just talked about. I maybe want to talk about the fee a little more. And if we're thinking of applying the fee to cleanup efforts, I would think we would need to do that sooner or later than later, but maybe that's not as important. Maybe we're not thinking of using the fee for cleanup. Maybe that's more about zoning's costs on that. I don't know if that has that big of an impact. The only other thing that I would say is, as we think about opening up the window, if that's something that we want to consider, I'd like to talk with some of our other intergovernmental partners, because that will have an impact on this, on our municipalities as well. And I'd just like them to sort of weigh in on what they think about that. Now, that said, people can buy fireworks in any county and bring them into the city of Lawrence, Eudora, or Baldwin. So I don't know that that's really an impediment, but so I do like having a little more extra time to talk about it, but I also like opening up the window to sort of balance the increased fees. That seems to be a logical connection to me. So, but I have no problem delaying it. I would be in favor of delaying it after the season. I think that the owners made some good points.
Tanya Voigt, zoning director. I agree. So I think that originally we felt some pressure to try to get these regulations, drafted and in front of you and have, a copy ready for this year. And there was just, that was pressure that we put on ourselves. And we had also talked with several of the fireworks stands from last year to kind of let them know that we were anticipating some changes for this year. Little did we know that we didn't realize that many of the fireworks vendors, they ordered their fireworks in October already. They're already gearing up. They're in the middle of the busy season, and we didn't quite coordinate that nor understand how early they start, and that we really are going into their busy season, and this will take time away from what they're doing. So I feel very comfortable waiting until after the 4th of July and maybe coming back to you guys in August. And then that will also give us a chance to have a meeting with the Fireworks Association, an official meeting with them, and then just be able to talk to everyone at one time versus everyone individually. And then just prepare, make some changes to the regs and bring them back to you guys. So I'm very comfortable with all of those options that you guys provided.
This is Commissioner Reed again. I just wanted to say thank you, Tanya and Dre, for putting all that work. And I appreciated your comments kind of at the top of this agenda item, Tanya, that to present something that is perhaps a little heavy-handed on the regulations and kind of all the ideas that have been put out there and discussed with various people, to put that in draft form and have a large discussion and pare it down to really what makes sense is a good way to look at it. And I appreciate that framework. So thank you for all the work you did to put into that document and bring some ideas in front of all of us.
This is Commissioner Portillo. It sounds like we have a direction that, Commissioner Reed, were you jumping back in? Okay. Sounds like we have a direction that we're heading. So I would be interested in making a motion to table this resolution. Can we say to just late summer? Do we need to give a specific date, Sarah?
I don't think we do. And I would like to be able to leave it open-ended, so we can just table this item and for further consideration. That's all.
I move to table this item for further consideration.
I'll second that motion.
All of those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you both. We really appreciate not only the presentation, but all of the work that you've done with the community and all the work that you did to bring this before us. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we will move to item 4.2, the Lawrence Douglas County Fire and Medical LDCFM final report from the Public Policy Management Center with Wichita State University. Sarah?
Thank you, commissioners. While we're moving folks into the panel for this presentation, I want to take a little bit of a time to thank our team at Wichita State University, who has worked with the county, the city, a number of stakeholders that are outlined in the strategic or in the final report, for their time, effort, and attention to this very important. I mean, this is really the largest agreement that we have with the city of Lawrence in terms of its budget and scope. And it's been a long road to get here, and I am very appreciative of everyone's work in this process. I believe I'm turning it over to Misty, correct? Misty, I'll let you introduce your team and start the presentation. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, commissioners, for having us here tonight. Joining me is Tom Jenkins and Daryl Coles. They both were project associates in this effort. And we just want to echo the appreciation for Sarah and her team and Chief Coffey and Chief Fagan from LDCFM. It was a great project and a lot of details that went into it. But I will tell you, there's the tangible part of this, which is you have a great service and a great commitment to your community to make that happen. But there's also the intangible part of this, which is this partnership and cooperation that exists. And we are fortunate to work with so many public service organizations across the state, and you don't always see that. And so I think it's really important to call that out. It's not always easy to make these situations work, but definitely valuable. So just wanted to thank leadership for that and for making that possible. So Sarah, can I share my screen? Are you running PowerPoint? How does that work?
You can share your screen.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Chief Coffey, did you want to say anything else before we get started, or you want me to jump right in?
You can go ahead and start right into it.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, hopefully in front of you have the screen, the right screen up for our review. I'll just kind of walk through the different parts we're going to talk about tonight. The agreement really has three main areas that we want to share. Governance, how the operation agreement will be reviewed by leadership in cooperation with both organizations, the financial piece, and then in service delivery. Those are kind of the three areas that we'll hit on tonight. In each of these areas, you'll hear us talk about items we think should be included in the actual agreement, and then other items we think that are more appropriate to be in a work plan or future items for considerations by both organizations. Just a little history on what we were asked to do. In the RFP, we were asked to look at these main components to ensure, of course, that standards were met by the National Fire Protection Association. We wanted to make sure that everything that we were recommending was within Kansas statutes, of course. We did best practices research, both from a national perspective, but also looked at state organizations that might be comparables, as well as best practices within the industry. We looked at the current EMS model and thought about innovative practices. We have a lot of great things already happening within LDCFM, but also with your behavioral health and healthcare that you have in general for Lawrence and Douglas County. And so included some thoughts about that as well. We looked at all the agreements. We did a lot of stakeholder interviews, both directly involved with the services provided, but also made sure that we talked to folks within Eudora and Baldwin City and other providers that are engaged in first response areas. And then finally, we made recommendations for the governance and financial model. So that was kind of our scope of work as we jumped into this. So governance is where we'll start. How should this be managed going forward? And so it's been a while since this agreement has been updated. And with any change in leadership and management over time, one of the things we wanted to make sure to talk about was that there would be consistency in communication and that some issues can be addressed in a more timely fashion. So our recommendation is for regular governance meetings between top administration that would include LDCFM, City of Lawrence and Douglas County, as well as others who are key partners in public safety providers and first responders. As I mentioned earlier, you have a lot of folks who do great work in your community, both in the medical and behavioral health. A lot of these organizations, as we met with them, have strong strategic plans and a vision for the future. LDCFM is an important part of that and are oftentimes first on the scene, as you would expect, in dealing with some of those. And so making sure, looking forward, that those plans are integrated and that you are leveraging the resources in the best way is important for your community. Establishing performance measures. Many performance measures already exist. LDCFM has many that they are required to do, many that they look at. Not what we're recommending is just that those be shared. Part of an agreement should be an agreement on what service standards are being met, both within the City of Lawrence, an incorporated area of Douglas County, so that everybody feels good about and understands what service level should be. We think that the part of the agreement is ensuring representation from Douglas County in the LDCFM leadership selection. And especially with Chief Baxter coming on, and I forgot to mention Chief Baxter when I was thanking all the people, and definitely meant to thank him. So this is what happens when you name people by name there. So definitely that's another great opportunity to make sure there's a connection there. The corner scene investigation, you'll hear our Daryl Coles and Tom Jenkins talk about this more, but one of the provisions for any of this is to make sure that we are deploying resources at the most important and emergency situation. And so corner scene investigation is something that can detract from that emergency situation. So we want to make sure our recommendation is that this be phased out. And I know Sarah has a plan that she's working on to make that happen. And then the last item that we think we should be in agreement is to look at a 3-year time frame. It's been a number of years since this has been updated. We're recommending some changes and think that everybody will be best served if this is done in a timely fashion to be able to say what worked well, what should need to be improved. And that's the goal, is just kind of the continuous improvement of this agreement and not wait, a few decades to do that. Other things that we think should be considered for your work plans is defining other stakeholder responsibilities. And really this is a system of care that you provide, and you have other first responders, and knowing what their responsibilities are and that network is important for this. We think technical rescue is a conversation that came up, and that's just something as part of the work plan, as part of governance, should be delved into deeper and deserves its own analysis and work. The non-emergency medical transfers, this again reverts to making sure that you are deploying your resources in a way that meets and ensures availability and reliability for your emergency services. And so non-emergency transfers are something that could be looked at in the future, that would not be something that necessarily LDCFM did, or could be just a different model, and that would require a policy change. Again, this is something where there would need to be more analysis done on that, but it could be an opportunity to make sure resources are available for first responders. Chiefs meet regularly already, fire chiefs. Recommendation here is just that maybe quarterly or 1 or 2 times a year, that's expanded to other first responders to make sure there's a clear conversation, communication, and direction for services there. Amplifying intergovernmental service agreement support. You are unique in the number of service agreements that you have between the city and county. And that's a good thing from a public service perspective, and leveraging that is important. It's also work. And it took us time to truly understand all the nuances of what this relationship meant. Having someone who's consistently looking at these for opportunities, I think would serve both organizations well. And then finally, looking at other measurements. As I said, there's a lot of performance measurements that exist already, but making sure that you as policy leaders and leadership staff are consistently looking at those to make sure that service are meeting your objectives that you want, and that for the public that you serve, that you can speak to that and have clear understanding for that. And those might change in time. And so just want to make sure that that's on the radar for policymakers and management leadership. So those are the governance recommendations. I'm going to turn it over to Tom Jenkins, and he's going to talk about the financial model.
Thank you very much, Misty, and I appreciate the introduction. The financial model was associated with a lot of complexity. The original process was cumbersome, and so the financial model is really just intended to align the various responsibilities and allocation of resources, understand how we handle the items within the budget that are both EMS, emergency medical in nature, and fire, so that we call those shared resources, and I'll go over that. And also the City of Lawrence has an administrative fee structure, and so we'll discuss that as well. On the next slide, the current financial model, there is a percentage allocation where Douglas County pays for 100% of the EMS expenses. It pays for the staff there at Eudora, and all other expenses are allocated based on a percentage model that is just archaic. It is derived from the original amalgamation between the existing county ambulance service and at the time Lawrence Fire, and it just needed to be updated. It's something that certainly was worthy of review. The financial model that is proposed, what it does is it takes a look to identify those expenses that are ambulance or emergency medical in nature. It takes a look to also identify those that are non-emergency medical in nature. Those are indicated in the red. And then it also looks to identify those costs that are shared. There are many in a system like this where firefighters and paramedics and EMTs are all cross-trained, and many things have a benefit to both fire-related responses and EMS responses. There's just a lot of shared costs that are nearly impossible to divide into one category or another. And so the shared costs are allocated in the proposed financial model at 36% to Douglas County and 64% to the city of Lawrence. So a fair question that will come up is, well, where do we get this percentage cost share? And while there are many ways that you could theorize doing this, what we found to be the most operational and I would argue even common sense was that those costs are allocated based on how staffing is developed in the field. There's 7 ambulances every day. And so 36% of the minimum staffing every day, the ambulance staffing, when compared to the other staffing that Lawrence Douglas County Fire Medical has for fire trucks, that's where that cost share is derived, is kind of where the rubber meets the road. The financial model on the next slide shows you that when you take that idea of allocating into these 3 different buckets, those costs, what you find is that the EMS only costs accumulate to about just over $1 million. Those fire only costs that are responsible to the city of Lawrence are just over $500,000. And then there's about $20 million in shared costs. And of those shared costs, that is the part that we would apply this formula, sharing 36% to Douglas County, 64% to the city of Lawrence. So on the next slide, you can see that if you add up all of those various components, the EMS only costs of about $1 million, shared cost using that 36%, 64% cost factor of about $7.4 million. Then the responsibility to Douglas County is about $8.5 million, and nearly $14 million goes to the city of Lawrence. This is using 2019 audited actuals. The administrative fee, the 10% administrative fee, follows a similar allocation, similar process, in which the total budget for LDCFM is $22,374,551.04. The administrative fee is about $2.2 million. So the county share of that administrative fee is about $805,000, as shown on the screen. And so when you look at all of that together on the following slide, you can see, sorry, I should have said on the previous slide, you can see how that all adds up. So the financial model, the process that we defined going forward was simply to look at the budget for LDCFM, identify EMS only, ambulance only resources, identify those resources that are non-EMS in nature, identify those parts of the budget that are blended or shared, combined fire medical resources, adjust for the administrative fee. And then of course there is a continuous, reevaluation of the cost model, that this is a 25-year-old agreement. It's certainly worthwhile to take a look at it over time. And also items 7 and 8, it's worthwhile to mention that capital expenses are things that need further discussion, that I think that the continuous collaboration and teamwork between the city and the county is in many ways a model for a lot of other geopolitical areas. And but this is something that takes some conversation. Corner scene investigation, my colleague Daryl Coles will talk about later. There is some financial model implications to that, but I think they're relatively simple. With that, the current process, as you see on the screen, I think is good for you to have some understanding of, but it is cumbersome, and again, very cumbersome. It's hard to understand. It took us many meetings really just to follow it, but this is problematic, and simplification of the process I think will lend itself to improvement in a lot of areas. The process that we're proposing is much simpler, very linear, where Lawrence Douglas County collects medical billing revenue. They send a statement to the county about that information. They send information to the county about expenses. Douglas County reimburses for the expenses, as I've described already. Subtracted from that is the ambulance billing revenue. And then in the fourth quarter, the audited actuals are used to reconcile differences paid in the following quarter after the completion of an audit. So there's a very cyclical but linear thought process that is simpler to understand, which is important when you're dealing with people in two political entities, and from time to time having to explain it to maybe new folks in the finance department and that sort of thing. On the next slide, as I mentioned, there's some additional considerations for capital planning. I think that there's a need to always, track the finances, have transparency. The simplification of the process, I think, helps with that considerably, just in understanding it. There's going to be continued growth. That's a busy system. It's a good system, and but there needs to be plans in place between both entities for change and growth over time. And you should have future conversations about cost allocation. The cost allocation being, especially the shared cost allocation, being based on staffing. Staffing will change from time to time, and so it's worthwhile just to open the lines of communication and keep that conduit well exercised to keep it relevant. On the following slide, I will turn it over to my colleague, Daryl Coles. Thank you, Misty.
Good evening, Daryl Coles, Project Associate with WSU. I'm going to just run through some bullet point things that we found a lot through our stakeholder involvement when we were doing interviews with all the various groups. Most of the stuff I'm talking about is just things that we want to bring forward as that would enhance your system, that probably won't make your formal agreement between the county and city, but things that we've just wanted to highlight that we just felt was important because we did gather all this data. We talked to all these people, and we just thought it was very important for us to bring this information forward. And with the service delivery of just your ambulance service, we feel that that's a very, very strong component. There's little things that could be done here and there, but what we did find as we were interviewing everybody and going through all the data is that we wanted to bring forward the thought process of a much more of a systems approach within your service delivery model. We believe that you do have a lot of good responders, and all those responders are pulling on the rope the same direction and providing really good care to your citizens. But we think there's some different strategies that can be put in place to make the service even better. So with that, we'll go through some of these. We think just a clarification of the tasks of all the agencies and where they fit within the system would be a good thing to have happen, and make that formal. Just analyze any systems changes that do occur, whether it be movement of the fire districts, or people are added here and added there. Just see what that will do to your system. One thing that we know will help, and this is one of those where it's kind of fun to be a consultant, because I can dip in and say, hey, you need to do this, and I get to run, because this would be a very, very heavy lift would to have a comprehensive way of collecting data within your system. The fire medical component does a very good job of putting all of their data into the system for quality assurance purposes and for managing the ambulance system. They have to do through Kansas Board of EMS regulations. But there's a vital missing link to their data, and that's your first responders and their, at the very least, all of their run times and when they first get to the patient, so on and so forth. Especially with your time critical diagnosis type patients, with your heart attack victims, your STEMI victims, your strokes, your traumas. The first responders getting there quickly and providing care is very important, and it does make a difference. But you're not collecting any data in your system, and without data, it's hard to make improvements. We heard from a lot of our stakeholder groups that there's a problem with the medical supply process, and we'll leave it there. It's just simply that elementary. It seems to be that they have some troubles getting their medical supplies the way they would like. And then we talked about performance standards again, and that goes back to the data collection. Having a systemic way to adopt performance standards for your entire system, for your ambulance service, for your first response, and on into the hospital. Some other things that we just wanted to touch upon is there are ways, national ways to improve dispatch systems, and that could be through accreditation or NFPA standards. But we didn't dig deep into. I'm not saying there's a dispatch problem, by the way, but just there's ways to do that and good tools in place to enhance your 911 communication system, and then pursue systems innovations. I know that the fire medical program, after studying them, they are very aggressive towards innovation. And I can tell you, just seeing some of the EMS medical billing practices that are starting to occur through ET3 and some other innovative type things. Some of the innovations that they're wanting to push forward, for once that I've ever seen in EMS, they're going to be innovations that are going to come with revenue, and that's something new for EMS. Community paramedic programs, behavioral health programs, those non-transport type programs where you're just not taking people to hospitals, those are all programs that are going to rapidly turn into programs that are reimbursable. Some financial alternatives. We believe that professional process review or a billing audit of the EMS medical billing is in order. And that's not so much because we think they're doing anything wrong. We actually didn't take a very good, hard look at that. But I can tell you from talking to many EMS directors throughout the state and nation, every single one of them that brought in a third party to look at the way that they process EMS billings, they reaped tremendous benefit from that. And I can tell you that EMS billing is one of the most confusing and difficult medical billing processes that there is in all of medicine. So you would reap benefit from having a third party come in and look at the billing processes. And then just trying to look at different purchasing alternatives for medical supplies and so on and so forth. And the last thing, we talked about it a little bit, and I'll just briefly touch upon it, is trying to find a way to reduce any of the impacts from non-emergency work. Your fire medical department is running extremely lean when it comes to the number of ambulances that they do have on the street. So servicing a lot of those transfers or putting people out of service to CSI, so on and so forth, impacts the bottom line of response reliability and your having your ambulances available to immediately respond to your emergencies in your community. I think the last thing I have is something you saw already, but we thought it was a good idea just to highlight these again in service delivery, because a lot of these things, well, all of these things that you see in front of you on this slide is what we believe would be very good work for future plans. So these things more than likely, unless it's pushed forward at the end of the process, won't make your agreement. So these are generally those things in these type of reports that get forgotten about. So we just wanted to bring them up again about making sure that all the stakeholders in the entire system understand their responsibilities and the piece of the pie they have, and that technical rescue is out there and needs to be talked about. We feel that non-emergency transfers need to be looked at in the future, that your first responder groups and your fire medical group and the medical director all need to meet on a regular basis to make sure everybody's going the same direction. One thing that, and this was one of those little nuggets that I'm going to take with me out of this project, is we did find a best practice that there are some government entities that are structured much like you, that have a lot of cooperation and a lot of agreements between the county and city, actually have an FTE 100% dedicated to those agreements. That their job is a liaison between the two governments to make sure that the agreements are being followed, that the agreements are current, and they just kind of lend that support to those service agreements to make sure that those two governments are working properly. And then we're measurement people, all us three that you hired, develop as many measurements as possible and make sure you're measuring and improving at all times. That's all I have for that piece of service delivery.
Great. Well, that is our formal presentation to you, and we're glad to open it up for questions and clarifications that you might have.
This is Commissioner Portillo. Thank you so much for that presentation. I really appreciate it. I do really like the kind of 3-year check-in on this every 3 years. Can you just help me understand where you came up with the number of 3 years?
Sure. I think to begin with, we think there should be annual meetings between management to make sure that those items that are being addressed, from an administrative practice, are making the list. But I think for our commissioners, that gives a chance for governing bodies to touch it and to understand it and have that review in a 3-year time frame. So that makes sure that policymakers also have that opportunity. And it may be that the recommendations is no change, but with the number of changes we are recommending here, at least for the first, go around, I think 3 years gives you a time for both organizations to see if it's working and changes that need to be made.
Thank you. Questions from other commissioners?
This is Commissioner Kelly. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the service enhancements from a systems wide. You said that those usually don't get included in agreements, and I'm really interested in including those in the agreements because we're paying a 10% administrative charge. And so my question to you is, do you see those systems changes, those system goals as being the responsibility of those who are doing the administrative work of this?
I want to make sure I'm understanding your question, Commissioner. You're asking the system enhancements, does that belong with the responsibility of leadership within the city of Lawrence? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, so such things as like a medical billing audit, that seems like it certainly would be the responsibility of who's ever doing the administration, who has the responsibility of that. And that should be included within the agreement. Would you agree with that?
I think that's a fair assessment, that should be considered, and that I think what we're trying to make sure does not get into the agreement are things that could be handled on an administrative level, that could be done through a memorandum of understanding or whatever language that you use to talk about those agreements between your organizations. That the agreement level, right, is really at the policy level. So we want to make sure things that are included there are policy issues, funding issues, governance issues, and some of those more detailed things that may change more frequently than 3 years or need to be looked at would be handled in a different administrative document. That would be our recommendation.
Okay. Sarah, do you have any thoughts on, I would like you to weigh in on that.
Yeah, actually, Commissioner Kelly, I don't think there's a real correlation between the administrative fee and those items recommended in the report related to future areas of expansion, frankly. I think the administrative fee is really more related to the costs borne by the city of Lawrence to provide indirect support to Lawrence Douglas County Fire Medical. Those, the items listed on that slide and those recommendations, I envision that Chief Coffey would take some leadership in doing those things and bringing the partners and the stakeholders together that need to work on those different things, like medical billing audits, and then also if there were non-emergent transfers, changes to those policies and procedures, that would be led by Chief Coffey in collaboration with joint governance. But I don't really think there's a relationship between the two. I don't think if we do all those, the fee's going to go to 12%, if that's the concern.
I guess my concern was the opposite. I was hoping that 10% fee would cover those. I want to make sure that those get done because I think especially with the medical billing audit, that could really lower our EMS costs. So I want to make sure that that's getting done.
And I think then to Misty's point, what she was trying to refer to is that making sure that those details, those administrative details happen is up to Craig and I to make sure that as we work in the agreement that the administrators are charged with holding Chief Coffey accountable to make sure that we make progress on those items, but that we don't specifically list out, perform a medical billing audit in 2021 in an agreement that's supposed to last several years. So we had envisioned that we would create an administrative procedure, I would call it procedures and protocols that Craig and I would use to sort of hold the agreement and the service accountable for making progress. But it could be amended easier than cracking open the whole agreement. So I think we can work to make sure Chief Coffey's got his long list of to-dos that we have to do after this document to make sure that those happen. And it will be referenced in the agreement approved by both governing bodies.
Okay, thanks for making that more clear for me. I maybe got hung up on a detail that I shouldn't have got hung up on, so I appreciate that.
This is Commissioner Reed here. I don't have any questions, but I appreciate all the time and effort that went into this and the spirit of cooperative agreement making, and really just appreciate. I'm excited to hear that part of the recommendation is a more regular review time. And I think that will help create some continuity moving forward.
Commissioners, if I could, before we open it up to public comment, I would like to say, just to continue on my comments from at the top of this item, this has really been a long time coming. There's been a tremendous amount of work that has gone into this process. I believe there's also been a tremendous amount of learning and understanding from different perspectives, how this impacts each of us. I did warn both our team here from WSU and the city, as well as commissioners, that I would take a little bit of time to call attention to the administrative fee item. And I do that because, you know, our previous commission decision on this and how we had approached this was to not pay an administrative fee between both units of government. The recommendation in this report does call for that administrative fee to be paid. Now, I don't want to, we can get into the weeds when we talk about the agreement. This is a different administrative fee model than what was originally presented to us last year in the budget process. It is a flat 10% fee. And I think the recommendation would be that that 10% could be used between both entities. You know, so as you know, the county is responsible for the administration of the Emergency Communications Center. You know, this would be proposed as a model that this 10% fee could be used back and forth in that situation. I do think commissioners don't need to make a decision on that tonight, as they're just receiving this report. But as we begin to draft the actual agreement and how that moves forward, I think it is important to note. And specifically, it's pretty, you know, that piece is gonna, what's really gonna lead to the cost increases on the county side for the provision of this agreement. It's around $800,000. I believe, just if the commissioners asked me, I was prepared today to answer, you know, it's my estimation, and it's really hard to do this for 2022 when we don't know yet what 2022 is like, but based off of, and I will tell you, we had some problems in 2020 and 2019 with 5 quarters of revenue. So I won't get into those weeds, but it has made it difficult to estimate what the true financial impact of this changed agreement will be. My best guess right now, and using both Misty's numbers and our numbers, is it's around $900,000. And so the largest piece of that is the administrative fee. And that is something that, as we approach the agreement and as we approach budget, I'll be looking for direction from the county commission as to how that should be handled in our 2022 budget process.
And I would just say, from the outside looking at that, I completely agree with what Sarah has said here, and that there is the language of internal service fee that the city of Lawrence has, which is a calculation they use and understand it, very common accepted budget practice, not something that Douglas County necessarily is going to do, capacity to do, or makes sense for them to do. So this was a way to try to create some equity between the two organizations, that a flat fee could be used for both organizations on these different service agreements that you will have with each other. So that was kind of the logic behind that proposal.
If I could ask one more question, I don't know if we were ready. You know, Misty, when we first embarked upon this whole thing, this whole study and the work that you have done, and I appreciate it all, one of the questions I really had, and I think I heard the answer, but I just want to make sure, is that this system that we've created in Lawrence and Douglas County, I mean, it was neat to read about the other communities and how they do it. You know, I mean, some are related to hospitals and all those systems. And it was just really important to me to hear from an outside entity looking at it that, yes, this is a good system for Douglas County, that we don't want to blow up the system for any reason, that we may need to work on the agreement and how we pay for these things and those things, but you still feel like this system is a good way to do it for the size of our community and for the values of our community.
And so I'm not content expert in EMS or fire. I get to play in this world quite a bit, but I will share from a governance and from the financial piece. I think you are leaders. I think, and I have said that to other organizations, right? As we look ahead of what public service and the issues that are facing, we have to be smarter about how we leverage dollars to have the best outcomes for our community, and working together. Well, sometimes not natural and sometimes not easy, right? Almost always results in better use of resources for these issues to move forward. So I absolutely say that from a pure public policy and effort, and really do commend you for that commitment. And I think and Tom and Daryl can jump in there on the content and expertise of it, but I think what we want to make do is you have good leadership in many areas within the city and the county now, and so creating that sustainability when you do hit rough spots in the future, right? And so that you have an agreement that will be defendable and as easy to understand as we can make it in a complex system. So that's what I would say. So yes, you should celebrate that.
From the EMS perspective, so I worked almost 20 years in a county EMS system, almost identical in size to your county. Worked for a medical director in the state of Kansas for a while, and now I'm at a fire-only shop at a fire department that only does first response. So I actually did a short stint at a hospital-based EMS service. So taking a look at your EMS system there, it is a high quality system. They do a good job. I think, and this was an I think, so this was a statement for me, you're lucky, much more lucky than most EMS systems to have very senior and tenured employees because they're inside of a very, very strong and traditioned fire department that takes very good care of their people. So when they're, I haven't seen the average tenure of a paramedic that works there, but when an ambulance arrives at the patient's bedside, you're going to have some years of experience there. And that's sometimes hard to find in EMS. There's a large turnover environment. So there's some really good EMTs, AEMTs and paramedics. And Chief Coffey has pushed it forward to have an advanced provider. They're all over the place because he sends them to AEMT class, and then he's got the paramedic program. So it's a very, very well-respected ALS department in the state of Kansas. So a really good system.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for the presentation. We'll open this up to public comment. Sarah, do we have anyone at the courthouse for public comment?
I don't have anyone here at the courthouse for public comment, but I do see that we have an attendee online that has raised their hand for public comment. Before I move that person into the chat, just encourage anyone else who would like to make public comment to use the raise your hand function on Zoom, and then we will promote you accordingly. A representative from IAF Local 1596 is joining the webinar as a panelist. If you could state your name for our records, I'd appreciate that.
Good evening. My name's Seamus Albritton. I'm currently the president of IAFF Local 1596. We're the labor organization that represents the firefighters, EMTs, paramedics here in town at LDCFM. So I also want to thank Misty and her team from Wichita, as well as county management, department manager, for including us in this process. Humbled to be a part of it, and overall very impressed with the work that was done in the final report as well. There were several future work items listed in this final document, and we're confident that we're going to be involved in those discussions as those progress. But I do want to use tonight to point to one specific and talk about the offered solution that we would advocate for. So in the final document, it discusses, and tonight during discussion, there was talk of all the difficulties that non-emergency medical transfers cause for our deployment model and our availability of response. And the report goes on to offer 3 different solutions. As the EMS professionals in town, we would advocate to use the solution that is suggested to create another LDCFM ambulance dedicated to handle these calls and to staff it with our people. I also want to passionately speak out warn against the idea of a private EMS, or third-party EMS being offered these calls and to be invited into our community. Currently, when our our community members call for an ambulance, whether if it's for a true emergency or to be transferred from one medical facility to another, they are using a government service and they are getting top quality care, the best care available. If we were to invite a third party in, otherwise known as a private ambulance system, otherwise known as a for-profit ambulance system, which is what the majority of these organizations are, they're for-profit businesses, we're subjecting our community members to all the issues that are associated with for-profit medical care systems. These private for-profit ambulances are notorious for poor care, charging their patients high fees, overcharging them, and then paying their employees little to nothing. I think it was even mentioned that in other areas of EMS, there's low turnover. That's because of all these private ambulance services not treating their employees well, which results in all sorts of problems going down to the care of our patients. However, if we choose the suggestion moving forward, and I realize that we're still in the early stages of this, but the suggestion to create that additional ambulance dedicated for these calls and staff it with our people, we're still continuing that government service. And we're still continuing with a system that views our community members not as potential revenue, but as the people they are. And that is what I believe is most aligned with our values as a community. You know, there's even in LDCFM's vision statement talk about holding each other accountable to the community's values. Let's continue to do that with all aspects of our EMS work and our paramedics and EMTs. Let's continue it to keep it in-house. Notably, if we continue with a system where LDCFM is managing these non-emergency calls, though it would be with a dedicated ambulance, that's a system where our elected officials and our appointed county and city management are under direct control of the people doing the work. That gives us the most accountability with the employees on those ambulances to hold them accountable to our community's values. And that's what we would advocate for. So like I said, I know it's still early on and I'm confident we'll be involved in these discussions. But I thank you for listening to me tonight.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the public comment. Sarah, do we have anyone else?
I'm not seeing anyone else with their hand raised.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there any additional discussion from commissioners? This item was for information purposes, so I'm sure that we will see more in the future.
Yes, thank you, commissioners. Our intent would be to begin drafting those agreements and bringing them to you for future consideration.
Fantastic. And now I would move item 4.3, executive session for the purposes of consultation with county counselor on matters which would be deemed privileged under the attorney-client relationship. The justification is to maintain attorney-client privilege in a matter involving Douglas County. And for that, I move the Board of County Commissioners enter into executive session for consultation with the county counselor on matters deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship and for the purposes of receiving legal advice regarding recent legislation. We'll return to open session in this Zoom link at 8 p.m. That would give us time for maybe a 5-minute break before we head over to the executive session Zoom, and then 22-minute discussion with council with a promise to come back at 8 p.m. to this Zoom. Included in the session will be County Councilor John Bullock, Assistant County Councilor Brad Finkeldye, and County Administrator Sarah Polinsky.
Second.
All of those in favor, please meet me in the executive session Zoom link in 5 minutes. So let's do a quick 5-minute break.
We have to
I
vote.
do think we do have to vote.
Okay.
Yeah.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Zoom has started doing this very fun thing where it logs me out when I'm in the middle of meetings. So if I'm trying to like jump between links, I have to then go back and log back in. This is Commissioner Portillo. Thank you all for returning. I believe now we are to appointments.
Actually, Commissioner, I need you to say for the record that no action was taken inside the executive session.
No action was taken inside the executive session. So now we are ready to move on to appointments. And I believe we have an appointment for the Food Policy Council.
So commissioners, I've been visiting with the chair of the Food Policy Council, Tyler Lindquist, and I would recommend we hang on another week here. I think there are some new names that have emerged. And I would encourage you all to reach out to Tyler as well, because we can't talk about it here. I mean, we could talk about it here, but because we can't talk to each other, I would encourage each of you to maybe reach out to Tyler or to Kim Kreiner Ritchie and talk to her a little bit about it would just be good to sort of make sure that we're all comfortable with who we want to put in this position. So I would just encourage you to reach out, and if we could give it one more week so you could hear some of those other names that have emerged, I think that would be a good use of our time.
Sounds good to me. Do we have any other appointments to consider? Okay, then we will move on to miscellaneous. Sarah?
Commissioners, you have my packet in the memo. Just to really briefly run through it, the latest legislative update is included. And you see an invitation from the Wakarusa Valley Heritage Museum on an upcoming event. And as was mentioned in our work session earlier today, emergency management was recognized as the 2021 Healthier Together Leadership Award recipients, and then also recognized yesterday was Bob Tryansky, Director of Behavioral Health Projects, was recognized as the 2020 Douglas County Health Champion. So we're really proud of that recognition and our collaboration with Lawrence Douglas County Public Health. And that's all I have, Commissioners.
This is Commissioner Portillo. As we're starting to see more things open up and more events and things, I did have a couple of things. The first is just that I'll be at the opening of the farmers market on Saturday. So if either of the other commissioners are planning on being there, probably just need to let folks know.
Yeah, Sarah, we probably need to notice that because I'm planning on being there as well.
Thank you, commissioners. And this is something we used to do quite frequently, so it's nice to see it return. We will just notice that we may have more than one commissioner there and that no county business will be conducted. And I think we can find the opening of the farmers market information. Robin can get that posted. Does anyone else have other items they'd like to make sure that we get calendared?
Nope, I don't have any items to add to the calendar. This is Commissioner Reed here. I just wanted to mention, because it came up to me about almost a half dozen times today in various interactions today and yesterday, that people have heard the word that Douglas County has the largest percentage of vaccinations completed. And I just want to shout that out and make note to any staff. I mean, such a deep gratitude of staff to all the different community partners, the health department and emergency management and LMH. And it's an incredible feat. And I think that it's been a really exciting thing to bear witness to in the past few months, and people are taking notice. And it, yeah, like I said, it came up a bunch of times in various conversations and places. So thank you everybody for the hard work behind that.
Yes, I was on a statewide call today, and it was neat to be able to brag to our other colleagues in other places about Douglas County, and they brought it up. I did not bring it up, and it was really nice. And also it was really nice to offer them, like, if they want to drive to Douglas County today, we could probably accommodate their need for the vaccine based on how many opening appointments we had today. So that was great. Commissioners, I'll share. We had a meeting of Behavioral Health Leadership Coalition. We're getting more details on the crisis center as that group continues to work through the particulars of how we're going to fund that. There is still work to do on this, and we're still sort of figuring that out. But I think, Sarah, do you have maybe a timeline of when we might see that? I mean, would that be part of the budget process, you think?
Actually, commissioners, I think we're planning right now for a late April. So on the 28th of this month, you would have a work session that would be a review of the funding model, both like what would be proposed for budget moving forward for 2022, and then also what we're calling the pre-funding agreement. So the startup costs associated with getting ready for that on the 28th. And then also, in addition to that, you know, there's an expansion for the integrated crisis team at LMH Health, which is really this bridge to help. You know, we've been doing a lot of work there, and we need to expand that as we begin to grow in to the crisis center. And then there'll be a conversation at that same meeting about that extended agreement. So I think you're gonna see some of that before budget, and then be able to ask questions, and then we can have additional follow-up and the budget process as well.
Thanks, Sarah. We also got some updates on mobile crisis response and sort of how that work is going. And I'm sure we'll hear more about that in 988. I don't want to get into all the details and ruin the excitement of that update that we'll get. And then the last thing I would say, and I just want to commend Sarah and Bob for this work, is sort of a coalescing of the behavioral health budget priorities. This is something that I think, well, quite honestly, I've asked for in the past years is, instead of lots of individual agencies, is there a way we can work with partners in a grouping, and they can sort of identify some priorities, and working with Sarah and our coordinator. I mean, we have a coordinator, so they should be coordinating that team together and bring us some budget priorities. And there certainly is, I can understand that other value of, well, if I didn't get included, can I go directly to the commission and ask for a budget allocation? But that would be a very, very long budget process for us. And I'm not sure would be the most effective budget process for us. So I just wanted to say to Sarah and Bob, thanks for doing that. And it was a good conversation to have with those coalition partners about why we want them to coordinate together as they bring a budget to us.
If we don't have anything else, I would be excited to entertain a motion to adjourn. Anything else?
Nothing else for me. I move to adjourn, Commissioner Portillo.
Fantastic. Well, that one we don't actually have to vote on, right? So we can all vote with our mouses and just exit the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're adjourned for the evening.